So today we're going to be talking about, as a fun video, a little nerding out, but we're going to be talking about the philosophy of the Sith Code. Alright, so we're going to start with the first line, right? Peace is a lie. Okay, so the first word, peace is a lie. Well, there's three kinds of lies, right? There's generalizations, there is distortions, and deletions, right? So when we think of peace, what are the institutions that usually conceive of peace, right? Well, we think of peace as internal, and then peace as an external, aka the state, right? Or, peace between conflicting factions or whatever, right? Well, you know, of course, when you think of peace and you think of the state, right? Well, you can have peace one moment, and then a couple years later, there's war again, and then there's peace and there's war and there's peace and there's war and there's peace and the war, and it just goes on like that, right? And when you look at diplomacy, I don't want to say diplomacy, but there's a thing where after a war, the generals don't go home, right? What they do is that they make institutions and intelligence gathering things, right, so that they can gather information and prepare for the next war, or use negotiation and persuasion and diplomats and ambassadors to gain interests, to win their interests without violence. Right? War is just negotiation with violence. Right? Because there's something that the state wants, of course, and then they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And then we also see that on a microcosm, like a smaller cosm, with two people competing for a job title, or two people competing for a job, two people doing this, two people doing that. They're trying to improve themselves. They're trying to do all the things that they can in order to be better, so that they get what they want at the exclusion of somebody else, right? And then we see this in a microcosm within ourselves, right? Peace might just be an emotional state that we have. Now, would it be okay? Is that okay? Then, when you have peace with ourselves, or we have, conflicting things, like we're angry, or we have sadness, or we have these emotional shifts, a lot of them aren't peaceful. Really? So, the thing is that the external, we're projecting, right? And that's kind of where we're going with this. Peace is a lie. So they understand that the internal things that they feel is just projected out, and there is no peace, right? There's only control. There's only aggression. There's only passion. You can say passion is will, or you'd probably say will, or some sort of desire. And if you have a desire, you have the will to get it. You have something, and if your desire is stronger, then you have a higher will to go out and get it. Yeah, passion is also, there's a difference between passion and compassion, right? Passion is, going for that. It has no relationship to anybody else. It just has you and the desire, right? It's self, right? Self and the desire. And usually when we think of passion, it's usually something that's external, right? If somebody has a passion for music and they get really good at music, right? That's cool, right? But it's something from the internal, an internal desire, to an external manifestation, okay? And then through passion, I gain strength. Well, what is the answer? Well, like, passion for what, right? Well, at the end, he says, my chains are broken. So he wants to be free, right? The philosopher wants to be free. Free from what? Like, imagine, so if you look at the history of the Sith, right, when you look, the origin story of the Sith and the Jedi is that they originally started as the same faction. They had one planet, and there was two moons. One was dark, one was light, and what they would do is that if you had one tendency towards the light, they'd send you to the darker planet to balance out, and if you had more tendency towards the darker side, then they'd send you to the lighter side in order to balance you out. They wanted to be right in the middle. They wanted to be balanced. And then there was a schism where the Sith went off and they found Korriban and they founded this philosophy, and then the Jedi went off. So basically what they did is that they just split off. They were basically the same faction, and they still are the same faction. It's just that they express different sides of the same coin, and that's why none of them can destroy each other. That's why they can't destroy each other, because they're the same thing. They're the same thing, because the Sith have problems just like the Jedi have problems. And we can get into that. And then so through passion I gain strength. So strength is just a means in which you get to the end of freedom, right? Strength, when we think of Sith, they think of, strong-arming somebody, or using tactics to get what they want, or, we think of all these different ways that the internal is projected to the external. It's an external strength, right? Maybe emotional strength, right? But it's all for an external gain, right? It's all for an external thing. And then through strength, I gain power. Power over what? Well, power is choice. And because if you have power over something, you have the choice to dispose or use it however you please, and nobody can come in and take it from you. Because if you have absolute power over something, that means nobody else can negate your power, right? Nobody else can take it away from you, right? So power over what? Power is in relation to something, right? Well, power over what? The external? Well, if you look at the Sith, yeah, it's power over the external, right? They're always trying to build an empire, right? They're always trying to build something or get somebody to do something or destroy somebody else, right? It's all external. There's no internal here. There's nothing, if you look this with the frame of reference of gaining power and stuff over yourself, this would probably be better. This would probably be better philosophy. That was definitely biased, so please ignore that. So through power, I gain victory. So through choice, I gain victory because then you can choose victory. You're not just helpless. And if you look at the origin stories also of the Sith when they're on Korriban, where they got the majority of their Force sensitives, if you want to nerd out with me for a second, is that they got them from slave pits. They got them from slave pits. And then the selection process of how they'd choose acolytes and then how they'd have what it would be actual apprentices is that it would basically be social Darwinism. They'd send them on quests, or they'd send them on various missions, or they'd pit them against each other in order to see which one would be the last one standing, which one would be the last one to live. It was an honor to sacrifice, and that's also completely congruent with some 20th century philosophies that started major wars. So what is that? So it basically if we imagine the slave pits, right? There's no compassion, there's no self-regulation, there's just work, there's the master-slave dynamic, right? There's the abuser and the abused, the abuser and the victim, and so there's this paradigm here, and then it's also traumatic, right? There's no rights, there's no freedoms, so there's the chains analogy that they're trying to set themselves free from by gaining the personal strength to get back security and choice. So really what they're trying to do is to free themselves from, feeling helpless, from feeling vulnerable, right? Which is pretty consistent. And then when people are projecting out all these things like perfectionism, distractions, workaholism, all these different pathologies in order to distract themselves from the healing work that needs to go on in order to actually live a decent life, then you get self-destructive behaviors. And when you look at the major produce of when you look at the movies, of course, there's the rule of two that Darth Bane started, where you have the master and the apprentice, and the master teaches everything to the apprentice, and then the apprentice eventually takes over and kills the master. Right? So the main investment that the master ever makes is the very instrument in which would bring his death, or her death, because Darth Bane's apprentice was female. I think it was. Well, who's that? I forgot her name, but you can definitely look it up because they're kind of like this. Yeah, and so basically their biggest investment is an extension of themselves, which is self-destructive. And usually, when people project power and destruction onto other people, it's an aspect of themselves, the things that they hate or the things that they haven't synthesized and realized about themselves or synthesized and brought coherent, right? And, repair themselves from to become a whole person and not just isolate these different parts of themselves and distract from it because it's too painful, which is ironic that it'd be too painful for a Sith because, but it is. It would be for them. Victory through chains are broken because they're just when they talk about chains, whose chains? Well, ours. Okay, great. Who put them there? Well, clearly, the person that was doing the warden in the pits where the guy came from. Really? Really? It's like, but you feel the exact same way. You feel uncertain, especially in that environment where basically at any moment there could be some sort of organization or coup to destroy everything that you built, boom, wrecked because of some subterfuge that other members of the court, quote unquote, came against you, and that kind of goes with the Dark Council. Uh, it's not the Dark Brotherhood because that's Skyrim reference, but it's like the I forgot its name, but you know what I'm talking about. It happened in the Old Republic, the old Sith Empire. Yeah, so basically they're talking about the physical chains, and when we think about Sith, they're always like, oh, well, this person's oppressing me, the Jedi are going to come, the Republic are going to come and take my stuff away, my freedoms, my blah blah blah, my things to travel, my blah blah blah, my stuff, my idea, my legacy, my blah 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 blah. It's all these external things and nothing internal, right? So now you look at everything that they value, and what they're not talking about is the internal self, right? And that's where the change, because imagine Darth Sidious from the very beginning, right? You think he feels any better? You think he's not suffering as much as he did when he was, discovered by Darth Plagueis? Because Darth Plagueis was Darth Sidious's master, right? You think, you think he's any less suffering? You think he feels any more secure now that he's the supreme commander of basically everything? No. No, because who's a threat now? He's constantly scanning for threats, things that'll challenge him, things that'll destroy him. And guess what? He found the Republic. He found the rebels, and now that's the new challenge. That's the new struggle that he has to work through. There's no rest, and then they talk about resting on laurels, because if you stop, you die, like a shark, right? Like a shark, you stop, you die, you get forgotten, you get replaced. It's like, whew, that's really hardcore, right? So there's no reflection time. There's always striving, external, until eventually they kick the bucket, and what's left? Nothing, because it's all bulldozed or somebody else takes it. It's like, so what was the point? They missed it, right? They missed it, and that's why. Because the Jedi are focused on the internal path, right? And that's what the Sith are missing. But the Jedi are blind, so I'm just going to give you a preview of the next video, is that the Jedi are blind to see that these exact traits they have, or they work in exemplification of somebody else's traits that have these, right? So they don't realize this part of themselves, that base, passionate impulse that fuels everything, right? So imagine the Buddhist idea where stop desiring about desiring, right? It's desirable to stop desiring about desire. That made no sense, sorry. I desire to not desire. It's like, well, you're desiring, aren't you? And then it becomes like this whole, spiral downward into what am I doing anymore, because you can't, right? But they're ignoring that fact. They're blind, right? They're for the people that say that they're knowledgeable, they're not knowledgeable about the entirety of the self. They're only knowledgeable at select things. So both are lying to themselves. Both are lying to themselves, and that's why they're not completely. That's why they don't completely just steamroll the other faction, because they're both lying to themselves, right? And when people say opposites attract, actually, when you see the different expressions, right, they both come from the same origin, right? So when people say opposites attracts, really what they're saying is that they come from the same origin, they just express what they learned in different ways, but the same source, the same idea is the same. It's the same, right? It's like somebody who's really passive, like, kind of floats around as a chameleon, right? Versus somebody who's really domineering and, expresses exactly what they want, and if you don't do what they say, they'll, get out of my way kind of thing. Well, both comes from the origin of not being validated as being as their expression being worth anything. So one goes, oh, it's not worth anything, so therefore I'll just appeal to other people. And then some people are like, man, I never got the validation, quote unquote, that I wanted, and so now I'm going to make people listen to me. You see that? It comes from the same origin, and that's where the Sith and the Jedi come from the same origin. Not just from the story, but also philosophically, and that's why both are incomplete. And then the Force shall set me free. The only Force and the only thing that's actually worth pursuing is self-mastery. So they master everything about the external, but they never master anything about the internal, and they suffer and they die. They suffer and they die. That's hardcore. That kind of came off really crass. But is it not true? Like, what if you know, Darth Vader or somebody, you know, stepped away and they're like, man, because really what this is that they're really slaves to themselves, right? They're slaves to their base impulses, right? So imagine a lion, right? The lion has impulses. So if something, you know, hurts a lion, they're going to turn around and bite something, right? Or if there's a sheep in the thing, they're going to kill it, right? Because that's their base impulse. They don't think, right? So they're slave to their base impulses. Even though they are a creature and they are valid and they are equal, they just don't have the self-mastery, the wisdom to say yes or no whenever they want. It's already decided. It's determined. They're slaves to fate. They're slaves to their own mental processes. That the very thing that they're trying to break from is the external that they're trying to break from is actually just a projection of themselves that they're not actually dealing with, and therefore they remain that because they think the external is going to somehow set them free. And it doesn't. So, I hope you liked this video. It's kind of a bunch of nerd facts that I've been stocking up on, and I just kind of wanted to release this video and have a great time because I love philosophy and I love, you know, Star Wars, especially the fluff, you know, especially the stuff that isn't particularly the movies, but the stuff that creative writers come up with, and they have all these interesting storylines and how they come together and the character development, and it's just a really beautiful thing. And so I just wanted to share that with you, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care now. Bye-bye.